Hello, Brothers Random here. We have a special message for you.
You're about to watch our 100th episode. This has been a wild ride, and we just want to thank you, our audience, for liking, sharing, subscribing, tuning in for the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hello, and welcome to the Brothers Random Show. My name is Travis.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Logan.
And we are two ordinary brothers and a nephew discussing extraordinary ideas and some random shit. Michael, why are we here?
Today we are continuing our discussion on Gladiator.
What are we doing live? Echoes in eternity.
I like Spanish. I shall cheer for you.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, loyal servant to the true Emperor Marcus Aurelius.
With our guest, Logan Brown, who joins us for it. We left off on our last episode talking about the idea that in Gladiator, there's another character throughout Gladiator that is Rome or the mob. I first kind of noticed this when the character Gracchus, who's a senator, who's kind of the good senator, there's a scene where they are talking about the fact that Commodus is feeding into all the lusts and desires of the mob. And they say he will give them death and they will love him for it. Which we talked a little bit about the fact that Commodus did kind of bankrupt Rome, and they're talking about how he is bankrupting. It's expensive. That he is kind of bankrupting Rome. But he will give them death and they will love him for it. There's so many times Maximus is talking to the crowd, right? It's Rome he's talking to. The Colosseum, and they refer to it different names. And that's the whole famous, "Are you not entertained?" Your thoughts?
I mean, I think that it's another thing that people don't really, I think we take for granted when we watch it. It's even more prevalent in the director or extended cut is the kind of political and social machinations that are going on, like the Senate and all this like kind of political jockeying that Commodus is trying to vie for this concept of the people, Rome, the Republic, whatever it might be. And that kind of really you kind of see the kind of seethy part that, or in the opening part of the movie, Marcus Aurelius is trying to get away from. He says, like, there was an idea that was Rome. You could only whisper it. Anything more than a whisper, it would vanish. And I feel like it won't like live through the night. And he's thinking on like this concept of what Rome was and could have been, like the greatness of Rome. And then juxtapose that against like the mob, the what it is actually, kind of the seethy underbelly kind of component of it. And I just think that and then you see like kind of the political jockey between the senators, Lucilla and Commodus for Rome, this concept, this esoteric thing that is Rome and the people in Rome and whatnot. And I just thought that was like really interesting.
Yeah, it's human nature, right? It's like that's what they're fighting against. Like they all think they know what is the mob, which is the human nature. So there's like this fine line between having anarchy and having a dictatorship, and which is what our own democratic republic is supposed to be like, right? We're supposed to have enough freedom that we can go about our lives, but not so much freedom that we're causing problems for other people in our society. And this is kind of what's so interesting about this movie, is that it's kind of playing on this the human nature. And Rome, like you said, Michael, is like another character in this movie because everybody's concerned about what Rome is, and they think their own ideas are what Rome is, right? Like there's this scene in the movie with Russell Crowe talking to Proximo, and he's like, Marcus Aurelius had an idea of what Rome is, and this is not it. And Proximo looks at him and goes, Marcus Aurelius is dead. We can't do anything about that now. So it's such a great movie for that kind of stuff. And it's hard to believe that they just never had a script for this, that they were just all kind of going along, just making shit up as they went.
Not to get too not to draw just to draw another juxtaposition to kind of call it our contemporary life. I think it just speaks to pretty much everyone that's human or American, even at this point. They're like, there's this ideal that is our country, that is what our values, etc. And then there's the mob that it is currently.
Yeah,
it is actually what it is. Here's the mob and the battle for the hearts and minds and whatnot. But then there's this ideal. There's an idea that was the United States, and then here's the mob. So I think a lot of people it's interesting to see that kind of latch onto that juxtaposition as well. It wasn't lost on me that it's kind of almost a Rome is sometimes used as a reference to the current state of our country and our society. And it wasn't lost on me that there's a little bit of, you could probably draw that analogy as well. There's the idea that what we are, and then the mob.
But so the ideals are important in people's lives. We must have ideals. We must think of something to a higher plan, something to try to aspire to. And that's the problem, is that when there's not enough of them, or when they're kind of taken apart in our own society. Michael and I talk about this all the time, beautiful and rich. And our society doesn't want people to be either.
I think another one is our society is kind of on that mom thing, as you were also saying, is take away their freedom and they'll still roar. You give them bread and circus. I think it was
bread and
Ridley
circus.
Scott.
Yeah,
it's the whole thing about Rome is literally. I mean, you could sum it up by kind of that age-old quote, bread and circuses. I think Rome invented that, basically, to quell the mob and take away their freedoms. They give them bread and circuses, which was really, I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting.
So, do you guys want your minds blown? Okay, I'm going to blow your minds. Think about this. Think about the fact that there's a character in that. There's the mob watching the gladiators, and they're all roaring when this happens and that happens. But we, the audience, are also roaring during the thing that happens. And we're also wanting and wanting that killer blow, right? We, the audience who are watching this film, are also wanting all these things to happen. Okay.
We're in the Colosseum. We're in the stands.
We are the Colosseum. Okay. We are the Colosseum. We are the mob. Now, at the very end, and this never sank in as well as it did this last time watching it. Lucilla, Maximus, obviously spoilers, spoilers, Maximus dies. He's dead. And Lucilla stands up and she says to Gracchus, who in a sense is supposed to be the representation of the people, okay, the mob, okay? And she says to him, is Rome worth one good man's life? We believed it once. Make us believe it again. Now, if we, the audience, are Rome, if we are the mob, then she's talking to you and she's saying, are you worth a good man's life? You believed it once. Now you need to believe it again.
I think it's just it's giving credence to, the ultimate drive to kind of live up to a higher standard or to a higher moral, whatever the esoteric term you want to use for living up to the ideal. It's basically saying, set your standard higher, make it so that you are worthy of that one man's life again, or whatever it might be. Yeah, I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Your life, you have audience. The power in your life. You, the audience, you believed it once to be worthy of a good man's life.
Yeah.
Right.
And in this theme of stoicism, that comes back to that again, despite the circumstances, how are you living your life such that you can be a good person or walk upright, if you will, despite despite everything. So I think that's just another kind of extension of the Stoicism line of philosophy that is kind of espoused throughout the movie. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it is. I could probably think about that for a while.
Blew my mind. I was just like, this is what they're saying, right? This is what, and I mean, who knows? This is an interpretation they come across. I mean,
well, there's so much of that in this movie. There's like so many things that could be applied to us today because like all the scheming, all the of like
the scheming of a few dry old men, as Commodus puts it.
As Commodus puts it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think they're setting it up because basically when you have a moral bankruptcy in whatever political institution you have, which even though Gracchus is quote unquote the good guy, they talk about the entire time how there's kind of like a bankruptcy of not only the people, but also the representation of the people,
of morals,
and morals,
of higher morals,
virtues. The whisper, the ideal that is Rome, like it's basically a bankruptcy of what was that ideal that can pave the way basically for a tyranny. A petulant, vain, bankrupting, expensive tyranny, if you will, that is representative with Commodus. So I think that like the whole thing is really interesting, kind of a expose on like the moral bankruptcy of a society, if you will, or at least it's a governing structure, and how that might lead to the ideal falls, the ideal that is Rome falls, and then that can lead the way to tyranny, effectively.
Ridley Scott has said many times that he always saw Commodus as this tragic, damaged goods, and the reason he's that way is because of how bad of a father Marcus Aurelius was. Which, when you're reading Meditations, you do realize that he is more concerned with Rome than he is with his family, because he barely mentions family. Sometimes he'll mention them, but not a lot. Commodus says, the villain that you love to hate because he's so bad, and he's so bad to Lucilla. He's making these threats to Lucilla with her child. He's so weak and conniving, and so I don't know if I want to have empathy for him, but Ridley Scott was always in this mode of trying to have empathy for him because maybe he wasn't loved enough or something like that with Marcus Aurelius. So one example of this is like when he actually kills Marcus Aurelius. According to Ridley Scott, he says that they were just going to embrace, but once Marcus Aurelius kneeled down to him and asked for his forgiveness, it showed a weakness that Commodus wasn't used to, and it put Commodus off so much that he decided to kill him. It kind of turns that scene into something else.
Yeah.
What do you guys
think? Commodus is, though we are kind of, I think he's like he's kind of simple in his petulance and his tyranny, but he's kind of complex in a lot of other components. Like there were like, you see it in his countenance when he like kills his dad. He's so hurt by the lack of love from his father that he is willing to. He says, "I would burn
the whole world.
I would burn the whole
world."
He said, I would murder the whole world if only for you to love me." And it's like, whoa, so much to unpack there. Honestly, like it kind of, I was thinking about this a little bit, is I have a hard time thinking of any accomplished, powerful person in history that was a good father. Their work is not their children. Though I think many fathers, their work is their children. Their work becomes not their children. And Rome was Marcus Aurelius's child. So you have to wonder at kind of that complex relationship of he probably loved his son, but he didn't love his son as much as Rome. And Commodus probably knew that. And it's wonder can you be a really powerful, accomplished person and still give your time appropriately to your
children.
I think like Jordan Peterson touched base on all this, like the people who are at the top of corporate by being like basically sociopathic, sociopathic people sometimes who don't really have families. They don't really care for their families, but maybe that's the cost of going that high. And I don't know if Marcus Aurelius, though he is like a good man, a moral philosopher, etc. He probably was bankrupt in the area of caring for his family, as crappy as that is.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and that's a good point to point out, because we've heard that before. Ryan Holiday actually spoke about it on Joe Rogan's show, and we've mentioned it a few times, because he said, well, they're probably busy. And that's a good point, because when I think of my favorite filmmakers, I don't think their children aren't filmmakers themselves, and their children aren't highly accomplished people. So it makes you wonder if these like even Ridley Scott's, I know one of Ridley Scott's boys is a filmmaker, but he's never made anything of any note. So
Mhm.
it's like even the person who made this probably has a screwed up relationship with their own children, or a good relationship, and maybe the kids don't need to achieve outside of that. And
Yeah.
I don't know.
I guess we can ask the
speculating.
question of like, is it that Marcus Aurelius was bad? I mean, I think that's the age-old question, and though I don't want to place entirely unblameless Marcus Aurelius, I guess isn't there's a question is like, can you be a good parent and have shitty kids anyway? Or is it like
Yes.
how much of it's to blame? Now, I think that the stoicism in Marcus Aurelius would say that it is what it is, but I had a failing of stoicism because I didn't necessarily take action that was incumbent on me. I could have controlled my outcomes more, but I don't know. It's
Well,
interesting.
this is a dart in the heart of the idea of, what is it, lineage succession. Basically, a king has a son, and that son gets to be king, and that son gets to be king. To be in all honesty, is a real shitty way of having leadership.
You should rise to the top based on merit, not where you were born.
Merit, not because
Rome was kind of interesting with that. Going back, kind of a little history note here is Rome had kind of this hybrid system, kind of a weird succession, if you will. In Rome, in ancient Rome, basically adoption was not something you just did to like kids. Like you didn't, pick up an orphan, or your sister's kid, your sister passed away, and you adopt them at a young age, which happened often in Rome. You could adopt full on grown ass men and women into your family tree and make them your heirs. You could legally adopt them. Marcus Aurelius was an adopted son. So his adoptive father was the Emperor Trajan or Hadrian, and he adopted Marcus Aurelius and his son and his cousin, Lucius Verus, to be his co-emperors after that. So it worked almost sometimes for the Romans, because they could say, you know what, I'm going to adopt an heir that might already be basically, he has his comeuppance, he's a good political appointment. I'm going to adopt him basically to make him my heir. Merit. Kind of merit, kind of nepotism, kind of a mix of both, but enough to make it stable. Versus Commodus was actually Marcus Aurelius' son, like his son. So there wasn't kind of that component of adoption or merit based or anything, and he was put in that, and so you see it play out. It's really interesting. The Romans had a really kind of cool legal code for adoption and how that worked, and it worked. It served the Republic and the Empire after that as well, and breaks down when it's a direct when it's like just blood, just nepotism.
Yep.
Yeah.
5 good emperors that basically is called the era of the Pax Romana, or the Roman peace, and Marcus Aurelius being the last one. And I don't think any of those were actually like by blood related. They were in succession by basically appointment or adoption.
By like merit, which is, and it was like, all right, that worked out pretty well for a little while, and then
until it didn't,
until it went back to the succession of blood. And
it's hard not
that way.
Well, it's hard to read Meditations and see all the wisdom in it, and then also look at Commodus and Commodus's reign, because then you're going like, well, how good was Marcus Aurelius but I go back to like advice is always harder on the person giving it. Okay. So you can give advice and you can say things and try to do the right thing, but in the end, you're as fallible as anybody else. So that might be why we connect with Meditations, but then disconnect with the idea that Commodus was the offspring of the man who wrote Meditations. So it's a really hard kind of, I don't know, harsh truth about life.
It's almost
I
a
guess.
stereotype even as well. Like we that and you always hard successful fathers sometimes breed indolent or like unsuccessful or maybe they don't
Petulant.
appreciate petulant or like basically they kind of just say screw off. I don't have to deal with this.
Mhm.
Children like you take it for granted effectively, and it's kind of a tale as old as time at this point. It's almost the stereotype. So it's interesting to play this out on an imperial scale
Yeah.
with Commodus and Marcus Aurelius. But yeah, I thought it was. I think that though the history is a little murky on the movie, I think they captured kind of the feeling that what took place between Marcus Aurelius and Commodus really beautifully. I mean, as far as like the historical context, it's
Yeah,
concerned.
yeah. The historical context is way off. But John Ford once said, when you have the fiction being better than the reality, you print the fiction. And
In the
that's
end of the
what
day, it's an awesome movie, and that's what we get. Like
yeah, that's
Gladiator
what we
was
get.
one of the
But
best movies ever.
yeah, so like Maximus was not a real character. It's a fake character that was put through it. Commodus was not killed in the arena. He was killed in his bath by a wrestler.
Yeah, or no, it wasn't
Narcissus. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
so
and Marcus Aurelius, I don't remember how he died. How did he die?
he died in Vindobona, like basically on the border with Germania, from the Antonine, where he assumed the Antonine plague. There was a plague that went through Europe at that time. It killed Lucius Verus like a decade or more before him, and then it killed him as well. It was like so he died of sickness in his sleep. So they could play that like
Yeah,
Commodus was there with him. So like maybe
you could play
Commodus
it.
did
Yeah.
kill
Yeah.
kill him. Like honestly, like as far as the representations, again, to just do a little bit of Greco-Roman geek road, as far as like the representations in cinema of the Roman world, I think Gladiator did a really decent job. But if not like totally by historical accuracy, by feeling the mob of Rome. Like there
Mhm.
was a lot of emphasis in the Roman world that was there was like a Brown like getting the popular appeal of not only the people but really of the military. Like when he says like I'm going to come in with my 5,000, my legion of 5,000, that happened more often than you'd like to imagine. Like they basically would get the loyalty of the army or the Praetorians, and that was how they wielded political power.
Mhm.
But it wasn't the most accurate representation of like Roman life, but it definitely captured the feeling of like the political climate in Rome.
Well, and you got to think, okay, so the movies that had depicted this era, the Roman era leading up to this movie, had been the older movies like Ben-Hur and Quo Vadis, the
Old Hollywood movies.
old Hollywood movies. And
Oh, they're so good though. They're great.
oh, they're great.
they're
Yeah.
great, but
I
they're
love
so
those shows.
different. They're so different from this movie. This movie, everything's dirtier, everything's grittier, everything's not as clean looking. And that's the thing that Ridley Scott told people to sell this movie. He basically said, you're not going to have a scene where you're sitting eating grapes. And that was like what was really the in the Hollywood leading up to this with a Sword and
Everything was
Sandals
much more
movies.
visceral. Yeah, sword and sandal,
Yeah.
that's the term. Like everything was way more visceral. I mean, you open up with a major gnarly battle that and it's very visceral, it's dark, it's gruesome and violent. Like I think people associate Rome with a lot of good things, which is like order, stability. Our Roman law is like basically the backbone. Roman law and Latin law and like all its history is basically one of the backbones of what we know as Western civilization, along with the Greeks. But at the same time, it was violent.
Yes.
There was like warfare, gladiatorial
Well,
ranges,
killing
slavery,
people
et cetera,
for
et cetera, killing people for sport.
for sport,
Yeah.
So that yeah, I just think that this movie stands above the crowd because the depiction and the grittiness of it. The scenes with Lucilla, we've got to talk about Connie Nielsen for a little bit. Like she's a phenomenal actress.
Oh yeah.
Like the fact that she didn't get any awards for this movie is mind blowing because she says a lot with her face through the movie. And for those that don't know, she's like Wonder Woman's mom in the Wonder Woman movie, and you should hear Russell Crowe and Ridley Scott talk about her because they almost talk like they're in love with her because she's a Danish actress who speaks like 5 languages. So she's like absolutely brilliant. They had consultants, like Roman consultants on this movie, and she knew more than they did about this era because she like is obsessed. Like she studied this era for most of her life. And
That's
so
awesome.
she might like have like this astronomical like intelligence. And she's actually the only character, one of 2 characters returning for the sequel. So I guess we should get into our thoughts on what the sequel may be. And I just like to start by saying this is a sequel we don't need.
I agree. I mean, I think right off the bat, and this is petty. This might be petty, but I don't know. Travis, you're a major movie buff, so this might be bark up your alley. But when you have to say, I was, and I don't know why Ridley Scott didn't think about this from a marketing perspective. Why didn't I mean, Alien Prometheus, not Alien 2? Like, why didn't you go like Gladiator, the new
Legacy.
Hope or Legacy or whatever?
All they had to do is
Gladiator 2, like
Gladiator 2.
Elysium.
Elysium.
Yeah,
Ooh, that would have been great.
Give Michael a couple $1 million.
Come up with a better title.
God, like,
or how about this? Gladiators.
Oh shoot. Jeez.
Hey, I thought the Twisters movie was just enjoyable.
And Terminators.
Aliens.
Or the Aliens, that's right.
Anyway,
So-
but to your point, it was, and that just right off the bat, I was like, okay, well, I mean, I really hope they do okay with it, but I think it'll be a fun summer blockbuster. Like, I think it'll be fun to see. But I think that like the legacy to live up to of one of the best movies ever, and for me, one of my top 3. It might be in my top 1, depends on the day, of all time. It's already kind of a legacy that you won't be able to live up to, even though you have like the same way more budget, talented actors, and of course the returning director and composer is what I think.
No, they have a new composer, unfortunately.
Oh well, it's already out.
No.
It's already done. Yep, we're done. Not watching it.
So-
But you already are setting yourself up for failure for living up to something, and it just speaks to what you said, Travis. Like, we didn't need a sequel. But
Michael, what are your thoughts on it?
Sounds like a money grab to me. Like Hollywood is in this place where they just want to do things that have a client base already. They just want something that they can it's a cash out, and I can't stand it that it just keeps happening. And it's a weird place to be where it's just we all know what's happening.
Let's hope it's more Top Gun Maverick and less Ghostbusters.
fair enough. Top Gun Maverick was one of the best. I mean, it was just a phenomenal. I went in like totally expecting a money grab, which,
Yep.
to be fair, it made a lot of money, and walked out astounded. I was like, that was a great movie. So I would hope. I don't have high hopes, but to your point, I hope that it leaves me feeling like that. Like, okay, this was awesome. Good job.
Yes.
But
That's what I'm hoping for, but I don't have enough faith in Hollywood to be able to do that.
But even with Top
Yeah.
Gun Maverick, there was like, there wasn't a finality to it. They could have added more, and they wouldn't have really batted an eye
Yeah.
by having Top Gun Maverick with
Yeah.
Gladiator. And it's like, there was a finality to it, a totality of it. You were left with what is the ideal of Rome, and and it's just like it feels like they tried to tear it open to find some sort of way to interject a new story, and it was just like,
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a needless sequel, and I almost don't want to go see it, just in case it like ruins something about this that I don't know.
I think we have a lot of treasured memories about or like we have a lot of call it even emotional currency in this movie and what it meant to us, and what I would grow up and like all the great things, and it almost feels like if I go watch this, maybe it will cheapen that experience a little. Like this, what I feel is the great movie Gladiator.
Yes. And I agree. This is probably one of my favorite movies. It's if not the favorite movie. It's been my favorite movie for a very long time. And then Christopher Nolan came along and made 2 or 3 more that I absolutely love. So let's talk about the ultimate speech scene.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the North, general of the Felix Legions, loyal servant to the true Emperor Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance, in this life or the next.
I've seen this movie, I don't know how many times. That scene still gives me chills.
Oh yeah.
And it gave me chills last night. I just watched it. I just sat there and soaked it in when he's sitting there and he's going to tell Commodus that he's going to have his revenge. It's gold. Absolutely beautiful.
It's a moment of someone who has no power gaining power just by the presence and their conviction and their words.
Mm-hmm.
He's a slave.
Yep.
He's a slave. He's a gladiator. He could die. And he says it later to Lucilla.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a slave. I could die here in this cage, or I could die in the arena tomorrow. But that's another cool thing. Like he almost brings it to the woman to and the woman calls him back to greatness. Anyway, that's getting off in the weeds. But
it was so awesome because we see this guy, you're right, he's powerless, but then he becomes the force of nature. And it's that combination of like, we all love, I think humans like a little bit of a revenge story a little bit, but we like a justice story. And so we as the audience are like, yeah, like justice hasn't been served yet, but we are rooting for this guy, and justice is being done, at least, in a social engagement, and it's the force of nature. And credit to Crow's acting, you just see it in his eyes. You're right, it gives me chill. I think it's one of my most rewatched scenes. On YouTube, I just YouTube that scene and watch that.
Yeah, and so
Commodus is Caesar. He is the king. He's the pinnacle, but who he is inside is less than this man who is a slave, but is a king inside. He's the good king inside, and he rises up. In that moment, you see him rise up, and
that's why Commodus hates him. Like, Commodus literally hates him because he knows that he is basically, his father loved him more, if you will, and he knows that his father saw Maximus as better and more capable than Commodus. So you're right, like king, slave, but when the Mac character Maximus breaks that barrier and basically it's like soul to soul, king, child. Man, it's like not only that, 100%. But I'm going to kill you as well.
Well, and on a less philosophical level, he's been hiding from Commodus this entire time. And then when he takes off the helmet, he's no longer hiding, and he's accepting whatever comes. And so this is kind of the metaphor of our lives. Stop hiding from you, stop hiding from being having greatness, and pulling the greatness into you regardless of what the outcome is,
or where your station is.
There we go. And it's almost like a line to stoicism is, I am a slave, I could die, but it is incumbent on me to control my reaction. Even that scene before he pulls off the helmet, he turns, and then he's like, don't you show your back to me, turn back. And he like, and then he pulls off. It's basically, I think in that scene, he's just enacting like, I have accepted that outcome, and I am going to exercise my agency to act this way. And he does that. And it's like, that.
It's the most stoic scene on Celluloid in video ever. And that's why it gives me chills every time I see it.
I think that every one of us wants to like have a moment like that, or at least a couple times in our lives where it's like, okay, but
I'm accepting the fate. I'm saying
I'm going to take it.
I can only control me. I can only control myself in this moment. It's perfect. It's a perfect scene.
with and like just like you can tell that 50,000. It's like the breath hold of like 50,000 Romans looking at him and all the Praetorians around him, and it's just like he is the force of nature. Despite yeah, it's just so cool. Like it's just like it's such a great scene.
Despite his station, I think it's a call to what and who you are inside, because it's a call of no matter your station, you can still be noble. You can still be a king in your own right in here. And when it's in here, it will influence out here, which is exactly what Maximus was. Maximus is the Joseph story. His men all admired him. And then he goes to prison and all the prisoners admire him. And he's a slave and he's a gladiator and all the gladiators admire him. That's not because of his station, his outward station. It's because of who he is here. You're seeing that kind of play out in not just the scene where he reveals himself to Commodus, but you also see it in the scene of where he and all the men survive this, what was supposed to be a death trap. They were all supposed to just be slaughtered. But because he rises to the occasion and he helps the men all survive, they make it out. Anyway,
he saves a man's life, a man who was cruel to him earlier in the movie. That does things.
Oh, that's a fair point.
What was his name? The barbarian
guy.
The German guy.
The German.
Who becomes his friend. He was cruel to him earlier, but then
I think one of the most comedic scenes ever.
Side note,
like when he like eats his soup for him. Like
yeah. That side note is he's ex Mr. Universe. That guy.
He looks it.
That's
several titles as Mr. Universe. That's the best example of leadership. Is like you are helping somebody that you probably should have just let die, and what that does for other men is that it makes them go, "Look at this guy," and then they all admire him. Immediately in that scene, when they go back down into the barracks of the gladiator barracks, they're all sitting there chanting his name at the end of that scene. There's so much to this. We could spend an entire
sure.
There's
I
so
think
much
one
to
other component of that is Maximus is action oriented as well. Like he literally says, "We're gonna survive if we stick together." Like y'all, like everyone get it, and then he directs the battle against the charioteers. So the audience listening is like, basically they're set up to fail in this battle in the gladiator arena. And Maximus knows the only way they're going to survive is if they go together. And basically as the enemy chariots are coming around, he directs them in basic order of battle. So it's like another leadership thing is like, yes, you're looking out for your subordinates. You are being stoic and then execute, controlling yourself, but you're also being action or you're being effective. He's like, we work together, we do this, X, Y, Z. And men respond to that. People respond to that. They respond to action-oriented people. They kind of, are leaders that way.
Goes back to merit.
Also to that is knowing who you are here, because when the mob and Caesar, the king, is telling you to kill your enemy, he's like, no, I don't think so. I'm going to let this guy live. Right. And then by doing that, he wins over the mob even more. Maximus
merciful.
Merciful. I wanted to talk about his death. And the reason is because if you notice while you watch the ending of this film, he kills Commodus, and there's a sense that he could be done. The woman comes to him, and his last words are in care of someone else. He asks if Lucius is okay.
Is safe. Yeah.
Well, and you could see it as a statement or a question, but he says Lucius is safe. And then so the child, the innocence, is safe. And now he can be done. And he goes,
I like
on.
that how you said that. His last words were in service of, or in basically service of someone else, or in protection of someone else.
Well, that's
really cool.
This is the masculine ethos. is your family is cared for. Your family is, and basically after that, that's you're allowed to die.
Have you guys seen the meme going around?
Yes.
Women, I just want to go
Peacefully.
silently with my family around me, and then men, and it has a fight scene of some kind.
Yeah,
and it's got the
Game of
music
Thrones.
playing.
I just want to die for something noble in glorious combat or what.
Glorious combat and stuff, right? Like
every guy, that's like every guy hopes for like a zombie apocalypse, or they want, because we can talk about, again, like when you have a concept of Rome that is morally bankrupt, it's hard for you to want to sacrifice yourself for that and for that feeling. The idea of Rome, the idea of these ideals, that's something that every guy wants to sacrifice themselves for. And I think that it touches on that quite a bit in the movie. Is Rome worth one good man's life? Make us believe it again. And we all, I think, want to have that ideal that we believe it's worth one good life, even if it's our own.
Yeah. Yeah. That's perfect.
So we all need to make us believe it again. We can be worth it.
Yeah. Spectacular.
Excellent. Before we go, a little quick round for you, Logan.
All right.
What is a good recent book that you would suggest?
In the spirit of this, I got two, obviously, Meditations. Everyone should probably read Marcus Aurelius' Meditations once a year or so. It's a quick read. It's simple, but I reread it again. My favorite book of all time, and I think it's been the book that's been the most impactful for me, is called 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. I don't know if you guys, I may have recommended it to you before, the audience. I highly recommend it. It puts a lot of things in perspective. It is, Michael, to use a term you use often, that book is my memento mori. I read that once a year, and it is my memento mori.
Great. I love that. Recent favorite movie, or just a favorite movie, like recent movie that you've seen or something like along those lines.
Oh man, I wish I watched a lot more movies than I do. I mean, and I hope that you guys take some time to discuss it. Another one, I'll tune in for that episode. But like Dune, I mean, the most recent Dune, it's not that recent, but it was so good. I liked it. I loved that movie so much. I just thought from a cinematic perspective, et cetera, et cetera. Denis Villeneuve.
Denis Villeneuve.
Did a spectacular job with that. So that'd probably be my pick currently.
That's awesome. I agree that was probably the best movie we had this year. So unless Gladiator 2 happens to be good.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right. Well, thank you, Logan.
Thank you, Logan.
Thanks for having me, guys. This was awesome.
We appreciate you coming on for especially this movie that we absolutely love. So
it has a lot of mental and emotional and just like upbringing bearing for I'm assuming for you guys. Well, speak for me. It has of many of the movies I've seen, it probably has some of the most mental or emotional bearing for me.
That's great. Check us out on social media, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just look for The Sword in the Skull. In the meantime, keep reading, keep listening, keep watching, learn more. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here? Commander!